So this is going to be, is it recording? Do I have to do anything to record? It says record. Cool. So this is a follow-up to the earlier one, kind of around subversive Chromium-based browsers. There was a couple questions around like how do we get bugs and how do we get bugs as part of the bug bounty? How do we get projects? And all of it comes from us, you guys, everyone here, the community. Like we need kind of a seed of some of these ideas for us to follow up on and for us to learn more. So this is going to be mostly brainstorming sessions. I've got some slides, and then we'll go into like we'll probably do a sticky note brainstorming, and then also have like a Google Doc for folks on the call that want to chime in too. So first thing, like the bug bounty was one of the things about in the last talk, and there were questions there. So I last minute added a couple of slides in for that. Right over there. So I'll put a link to the slides in the sheet for the schedule because there's a bunch of links here. But so the bug bounty program, we have a hot list of small, medium, and large issues, and anyone with edit bug access can nominate candidates. We have a candidate hot list. So if you or your team or someone has a pile of bugs that are kind of interesting, kind of important, but not something you can get to or you can resource soon, it's a great idea to just tag them as candidates, and we can follow up on, is this the right size? Is this something that would be eligible for a bounty, that type of thing? So that's one thing for everyone here probably to keep in mind, is that's a thing, that's an option now. Feel free to nominate candidates. I've got links to so there's a hot list for anyone with edit bugs and access, and then there's like a separate approved list. So folks in this room are probably going to be looking at like the candidates list, where we can go and we can say, hey, here's a candidate, here's something you can try. Someone can contribute to if they want to. And then the reps that stood up during the last talk, we will go through and we will approve the ones that we think are eligible or follow all the whole criteria. There's a good chance that someone will reach out to you if you nominate something and ask a couple more questions to make sure we understand, the scope of it. If you've looked at it enough to say, oh, this does feel like it's pretty easy, we just don't have time, or, we do need someone who's like an experienced Chromium contributor to do it. That type of thing will be valuable. So that's kind of the first part of that. So keep that in mind. Tag bugs with candidates if you have them. By the way, other people on the steering committee can chime in if they want to throw in anything as part of this little entry point. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to brainstorm. So someone asked about like projects and what's good or what's bad for projects. Here's the rough list. There's more criteria, but this is kind of the basics. Good projects are things like anything that improves code health for Chromium, anything around interop that is in Chromium or Chromium's dependencies. We can't improve interop by improving the other browsers as part of this. That doesn't really fall on what we would do. Anything that's a web developer pain point, things around fundamentals, perf, reliability, accessibility, security, things that benefit Chromium productivity. There was a conversation yesterday around brainstorming, around some focus there that I'm going to follow up with the person who drove that to see if there's things that we could probably look at projects there. And another kind of key thing is like benefiting multiple embedders. So if it's something that's specific to a single browser or only benefits one of the kind of users of Chromium, that's not really in scope of this. Bad things that are like new features or things that you're already working on are probably bad projects where it's, if you're halfway done, you're like, oh, we could just, shell this out to someone else. It's not really the intent there. And then anything around kind of implementing new features is probably like not necessarily bad in itself, but we've kind of said that that's probably not the scope of this. Might be useful to brainstorm and see if there's things we can justify there, but that's generally not what we're trying to do. Any questions on this before we start into brainstorming? Yeah, go ahead.
So what about stuff that requires intents to go out? Like, web platform changes are like web visible, web observable.
I think those are fine. And like the goal is for if it should go through the Blink ship process, it will. Okay. Some of those might require more handholding than others and might change the scope of things, but totally valid.
Interop fixes, for example, right?
Yeah.
We're hoping for a lot of interop fixes, so many of those will require intents.
I guess my concern is that, like, for example, I'm thinking of like one thing is like cookie store, right? Like a lot of these changes, like interop fixes, are like potentially deprecations, and deprecations are a little bit more difficult to do and take longer time, like just to measure, and like it can take a couple of years. You make the plan, you maybe implement it behind the flag, and then it takes 2 years to actually ship it because you have to like just wind down on the usage. So maybe that's not a good
No, but it doesn't feel like a bug bounty material.
The bug bounty, but maybe for other projects, right? I mean, you could imagine, we can come up with contract terms for any kind of project, right? But yeah, I wouldn't ask any, even at 10 grand, I would not.
Right.
Having done enough painful deprecations with myself, 10 grand.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit curious. So I looked at a glance at the bug bounty thing, and it looked like it was specifically excluding some of the things that are listed here, like code help.
Yeah.
So what is
So
the rationale behind that, and like what kind of project that included code help would be like different?
Yeah, so I'll be more clear that like the project brainstorming and bug bounty are two separate things. The bug bounty is the first project that we have funded, and that is like a subset of the possible things that could be a project. So the bug bounty is scoped to like 3 specific like bug areas for existing bugs, where projects could be much bigger. They could be much more open. I don't know if anyone has I'm trying to think of one of the two, like we had, like there's a project we're talking about, one around accessibility fixes, where there's like a handful of areas in accessibility that have been on the backlogs for a while that we want to just chunk into its own project and say, let's fund this separately and get it its own thing.
We are looking at one code health project, and actually we've got multiple on the candidate list, right? We've done brainstorming at previous BlinkOns, so we've gone through a bunch of those. I think it's just code health was too hard to scope for a bug bounty thing, right? How do you evaluate what it's worth, blah, 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 right? Those have to be dedicated projects.
Yeah, for the bug bounty, we want to start with user-facing improvements.
Or web developer phase.
Oh, well, developer-facing, yeah.
Okay.
Sarah, your hand was next.
So for project proposals, I'm trying to understand who would actually be picking up the work. So like for bug bounties, you don't want to pay, an employee who's a part of one of the companies who actually makes a Chromium browser, and that makes sense. But for this, are we funding someone external?
Yeah.
And then is that just like, is that a contractor? Like, how do we figure that out? Is that somebody who volunteers to pick up the project? How is it decided who does the work?
It's a bidding process. So I think it's kind of I think the easiest way is like the standard, like Agalia is probably the easiest example of like the type of thing that Agalia might do is probably an easy, example, not every example, but
I think we'd want to find someone who we had confidence in, who had the expertise to get it done, who has experience in Chromium, and that's a pretty darn short list.
I was wondering, just so that we get a sense of prior art, like, is there anything else comparable in other projects that worked well? Like you mentioned Linux Foundation that we're in, but like, was something comparable to this done somewhere else that we can learn from and maybe know what the criteria of things that worked well and didn't?
we've already talked, like on the bug bounty side, we've talked to Amy, is that who we talked to? Like about like we talked like bug bounties for security are pretty common. We talked to Amy who runs the Chromium one, and then on the like opening projects like this, Linux Foundation has a couple other things that we've learned from. Like the Linux Foundation kind of is the overarching not owner, but like running the.
But is that, do we have like a good comparable, something that's really good comparison, like maybe Linux or Apache or KDE or GCC or is there like a good, was some of this model implemented somewhere in a similar way that we can copy and paste from?
We looked for something like this to compare to. I don't think anything very close exists.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen a few other projects, like I think Igalia did something, prioritization, one of those, and then we looked at open web docs. Again, not similar, but so we've borrowed from a lot of existing things. There's nothing that's very comparable.
So it's fairly uncharted territory then.
I think the Chrome VRP is close in a lot of ways, but it's importantly differently.
Is it within scope to bring work the Chrome VRP over?
That's also a very established program.
It works very well.
While we're doing questions, by the way, I will throw this link up here. So this is a link to a Google Doc for folks on their computers. If you're not throwing out ideas there, or if you want to start writing ideas on sticky notes, not to stop questions, but we can parallelize if people don't want to have questions. You can start to write ideas down. We'll probably do some standard brainstorming, write down ideas and then group them. And then I doubt we'll have time, like how the previous brainstorming ones have gone. You've gotten a huge list of ideas and started to narrow it down, and then that's kind of it. So if you can put your name, if you have an idea, if there's someone that we can follow up on, that'd be helpful. But we'll keep going on questions.
I see
Ben
Ben
was
on
next.
this.
Oh, Ben on the call. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious. Sorry if this was covered and I joined late, but so I understand it. You said that people who are part of the organizations that are already part of the Chromium-based browsers organization cannot do this work. There's sort of like, it seems like a chicken and an egg problem, as Rick was saying. Like, there's not a lot of people with Chromium experience. Most of those people with Chromium experience are probably working for one of these organizations because, you know, they want to get paid for their work. Do we feel like there's a large pool of Chromium or a pool of Chromium engineers out there that don't already work for one of these companies? And if I understand correct, Igalia is part of this organization, right? Like,
No, Igalia is not a member of the organization. So I think
Oh, it's
most of them are at Igalia.
that makes more sense to me. That was what I was missing. Thank you very much.
And I think there's some intent with the bug bounty to have enough small and medium bounties where we can start to build up. You know, if there's someone out there who's interested and doesn't know how to get into things, figuring out the right way to
Oh.
ramp up. And
Yeah, I don't know, but anyone here who's on Chromium Dev have seen like all the emails from all the people that are trying to get on GSOC and trying to get on projects, and I think that could be a good funnel to create those new contributors and those like get new blood into Chromium.
I mean, it also tends to be like there are these types of projects where you really want them done, right? And like they have like more critical pathness to you, right? And you just want to pay someone to get them done. And I think GSOC may not be that, right? Like I think it's like you have some sort of, it needs a lot of hand holding sometimes. It depends on the contributor, right? There's some really, really strong contributors who you can absolutely trust. And there's like definitely not, like they're just people who are less experienced, maybe more confident in their experience, right? And so you have to have hand holding. You might not get done with the projects. I think that's just the only risk there, right?
Yeah. No, but I'm not saying GSOC is a replacement for this. I'm saying people who attend GSOC and get some Chromium fluency can then continue on to these projects or these bug bounties.
Sorry, I thought you meant like we wanted to funnel some of this into GSOC.
No,
Okay.
no, not at all.
Okay.
I'm saying it's,
I think the pipeline they're kind of saying is GSOC into bug bounty
into
actual
project.
Yeah.
Yes.
like big projects. That would be the like perfect world, like, you know.
Andy, can we have we shared the links to the candidate hot lists?
I have it
Because I think
in the deck.
it's in the deck. Okay. So I think it would be good to possibly during BlinkOn, like if everyone is interested, then go and look at the components you know about and find bugs, you know, P2 or P3 bugs, put them on the small list. Some other bugs, put it in the medium list. Things that you know about that you just simply can't find the time to fix, even if they're small little things. Yoav gave me a good example of one that was brought to his attention. He fixed it in like 2 hours. It's not like these bugs are necessarily hard. It's just like it's hard to get to them because we're so busy with our main responsibilities. So please do add things to the candidate hot list. There's no downside. Just getting more things fixed.
One more question. Is DevTools in scope?
Yes.
Yes.
DevTools V8,
WebRTC.
Yeah, WebRTC.
and WebRTC. It must be code in those repos. So
For the bug bounty.
for the bug bounty, no, but isn't the
And projects, right?
supporters thing?
I mean, we haven't said.
Yeah, we haven't said it, but it probably those code bases, I mean, maybe it's like something on standards could also be appropriate in specific cases. It'll depend on the project, but in general, benefits browsers based on Chromium in some way.
Like we didn't list Dawn, for example, on the bug bounty, but like Dawn is something you could imagine might make sense for a project.
Okay.
Right.
Thanks. Okay.
Yeah, so I think the Chrome existing VRT is pretty different, but if there are projects, asking people who regularly report to the VRT could be good because they have interest in Chrome and they are familiar with it. Separately, for people who are individuals, I think there's a huge, a lot of barriers to actually contribute to Chrome. Are there any plans in helping them get past that? Because unless you work for a company that regularly does Chromium development and has some a bunch of servers and whatever, powerful computers, you really can't contribute by yourself as an individual. So is there a plan to address that?
Yeah, you can, but it's high friction, and having whatever is GOMA these days access helps a lot. I don't know. So,
But then any contributor can get reclined access. That should, but no, there isn't anything specific there. We know it's a high barrier to entry.
Yeah.
I'm expecting a small number of
Give them
people.
like a cloud top or something like that should be. That might
We
be
can give them recline.
Yeah.
That could also be a project idea if you have project ideas.
I was just like, yeah, I just threw on a list like lower barrier entry to Chromium.
Yeah, sounds good.
Like, like I think especially for this for brainstorming, throw out everything on here.
Oh, yeah.
And that's one that I think I feel like that one could naturally come like as things, maybe the bug bounty really takes off, all of this goes, in a perfect world, all this goes super well, and realize like, okay, it's going well, but this area of is a difficulty. Let's get a project that is help lower the barrier to entry. And some of those might be a little odd in the sense of needing more involvement from the existing organizations to facilitate. But we'll cross those bridges when we get to them.
And at least for the projects, the smaller and medium sized, I think they would need something like that. From
Yeah.
Existing organizations.
Are standards projects in scope, like things that have shipped but are not documented well?
The scope for the bounty or for
projects?
projects? Yeah,
Probably.
so specification, like this is,
as long as it benefits the Chromium browsers. So just writing the specification by itself probably would not.
Like I'm thinking of like Johan's cookie work where like
Fix the spec and then fix Chromium to match that change. Potentially, I think.
The actual code changes would be, but
like not necessarily.
it's
Yeah.
not
Well,
standards.
I think those ones hit gray area where like, is it's totally in scope for brainstorming. Is it in scope to get it all the way to the finish line is where we'll probably have to have a lot of these conversations around like maybes and figuring out the exact one.
I think it should be, and like just my personal opinion, I think it should be in scope when we ask someone to make a code change, then to also go and do the spec change, maybe even work with the other browser vendors to talk to them. And like, I think that not having explicitly in scope feels weird because then we just like make, put on work for our engineers or like, of the supporters to do that kind of work.
Yeah, so a couple of comments on just what's already said. So something like MDN doc updating would not count as I understand it because that comes through the Open Web Docs organization. So, and then I would argue that in order to like get something to the point of shipping, then that would require the spec work. So I think I at least would say that's definitely within scope. Not an official distributor, but I can't see how you can avoid that. And then I wanted to ask. For the projects, so how closed in scope do they need to be? In particular, is something like the spanification effort something that would be an acceptable project, or is that out of scope because it's so broad and long-lasting kind of thing? I just want to get a sense of that kind of project concept.
We've got spanification on the list of things we're considering. So like we haven't decided yet, but it seems like it's to me. I think that the devil comes down to the details of how do you structure the contract, right?
Yeah, okay, but the point is they're not already excluded. That's not already a no, that's a maybe.
Yep.
Okay.
But fixing a security bug is, well, it's out of scope of the bounty, I guess.
Yeah, that's in the security payoff.
Right.
Ben, your hands up.
Yeah. Again, I'm sorry if this was discussed earlier, but I'm kind of curious what the RFP structure is going to look like in terms of like people who sign up to do this work, what access they'll have to like owners of the code or people who will actually approve like completion of it. Because I've seen a lot of examples of like good first bugs where like a student jumps on, does a bunch of work, gets it working, puts something up, and then like, 2 weeks later, a Chromium person will be like, actually, we want to do it completely differently, and closes the bug, or like, just does, what I mean? Their work is just thrown away. And I assume we don't want that outcome here. So it feels to me like these need to be have some direction, and like, we're pretty sure we want this in this like architectural form, or if there's ambiguity, there's someone you can talk to work through that ambiguity and like come to like a design before you write the code, which generally the Chromium development process doesn't formalize through Garrett or anything, right? Like we do that. So like, I'm just wondering, like, it feels like we need something in that space for some of these projects, particularly if they're very open-ended, to avoid people like spinning their wheels or like not getting anything actionable out of the end. Or I don't know, do we have like a plan to avoid that sort of problem in space?
I would say we need like someone on the inside as a sponsor for the project to, to take on I don't know, a 20% time commitment to help the project move along and do reviews and whatnot.
For the big, we're talking about for big projects.
Yeah.
For big projects, yeah. For bug bounty, it's harder, but still it would be nice to find someone, but like, bugs are variable in their capabilities, but for projects, you need someone to make sure that failure mode doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be we're for the bug bounty side of things, we're building in a few like levers for us to make sure we don't get in too terrible of a state. Like the fact that one of us needs to approve or I think it's two of us of the means that Chris, Rick, Fabio, me, a few other Nate and Min, there's 6 or 7 of us that they'll have to go through enough of us that we're not going to see something and be like, oh, that's a good first bug when we know it's going to be a hairy thing to do.
I mean, we're still going to make mistakes.
We're going to make mistakes for sure.
I've done this with interns. I say, oh, here's a great thing for you to get started on. It takes 3 months, right?
And I have to imagine for some of the larger ones, we'll do a little bit of back channeling of, hey, there's a large bug in your space. Can you carve aside time if someone picks this up and wants help? And we'll definitely be doing our best to facilitate, especially early on. If it gets legs and goes fast, then we might have to pivot a little bit to that. But
is the goal to attract developers who have the sophistication of an intern or more experienced ones here? I mean, because there's many cases where supporting someone's position an intern ends up being more effort than just doing it.
Roles may be diverse among the group, but I'll say from my perspective, from Google Chrome's perspective, my goal would be to attract people who have the skill already. That this seems like a way to get real value for the project, right? So, but hopefully, I think that a lot of the question comes down to, well, of the intern case, we invest in interns, not because they do net positive work right out of the gate, but because we're trying to fill a pipeline, right?
But that's not this.
I mean, I think we want to build a pipeline too, right? I think all of us would like there to be more people in the industry who are competent at contributing to Chromium.
And things like the bug bounty, some of the smaller bugs, may be worthwhile for some of those folks to try out.
This is
and build more expertise and pick up a bigger bug and, and maybe get access to some vendors.
And this, by the way, is exactly why we wanted to make sure DevTools front end is in there, because we've heard from external contributors that starting with DevTools front end is very accessible, right? You don't have to actually build Chromium to work on DevTools front end. You just need web skills. It's all HTML, JavaScript, CSS. So that was intentional in that regard.
Yeah, I mean it's generally a good investment too if it's an intern. You are investing time to be payoffs in the future. With a program like this, there's not as much of a guaranteed at the time you take kind of training of these people's skills will ever pay off. They're just there's not as much commitment from them to stick with this long term. So,
and that's why
to be clear about what the goals are.
Yeah, we're not taking steps at this point. At least I'm not aware of any plans at this point to invest in what Shannon was saying about invest in teaching, right? Because that often is net negative, right? Costs us more than we get back in exchange.
Can I offer an idea? Sorry if that exchange is done. Maybe for the bug bounty, since it's supposed to be low, instead of dedicated mentors or points of contact, maybe we should have a Slack channel in the Chromium Slack for the bug bounty in general, and anyone who's participating in the bug bounty, either as a sponsor or as someone who is owning a bug, should be in that channel. And if you get stuck, you can ask questions, and hopefully the collective wisdom can find the right person to talk to. I don't know. Maybe that's already suggested.
That's great. One thing about that, in order to be on the Chromium Slack, you have to already be an author. And that is often a barrier. I found it to be a very limiting factor. I don't know how we can get around that, but people who need help the most cannot access it at the moment.
But are we really attracting people who have never made like a single contribution? I guess if they're technically really skilled, then
Sure.
yeah.
Can we could we, if they go through this bug bounty process and get selected, could we use that as a signal to give them Chromium access? Like, like create a new acceptance criteria?
Seems reasonable. It's possible.
Sounds like it should be possible, right? Like I don't think there's a hard-coded rule in Slack that kind of makes it impossible.
And where are like one of the community help currently? There used to be like an IRC channel where you could ask random questions.
People go to the mailing list. People who haven't contributed before. That's I was just mentioning Chromium Dev with a bunch of GSOC people.
So for the person in mind of like they have some experience with the browsers and they're interested in doing more, for this like hypothetical person, why aren't they already working at one of these places that works on a browser? Like that might help with like, because part of also stuff like this is like getting it out and finding the audience, right? So where does word go out for this to find those people and how do they learn about it?
I assume there's probably some examples in the room, right? I know Yoav's story. I don't know if you want to share your story here. I'm sure there's others.
Sure, but yeah. So hi, I'm Yoav. A Chromium addict. Basically, I started working on browsers as a pastime evening thing in 2012. Got involved with the Responsive Images community group, and which was essentially a group of mostly web developers, and I was the only one that was, knew C++. So I'm like, I can do the browser work, and I did, and that like took way longer than I initially expected, but eventually we managed to ship a picture and source set in Chromium and mostly in WebKit. Like in WebKit, Apple folks ship the picture part eventually, and then I got a grown-up job at Akamai, working on server-side features for Akamai customers and browser features to go along with them. So preload, pre-connect, client hints. There were a bunch of other things on that list, and then eventually I joined Chrome, and now I work at Shopify doing something similar where it's not exclusively like server-side features and client-side features, but basically I'm pushing web features that Shopify needs in order to make commerce better for everyone. So
personally, I think this project would be well served if we can find just one more Yoav or like a couple more Yoavs. I would rather do that than find 1,000, hobbyists who just want to tinker a little bit, right? Like there's got to be more people with your kind of inclination and skills out there that just have never had an opportunity, or they got to do some other job to pay the bills or something, right?
Yeah, and your story is cool, but not unique, right? Like it happened, right? And not often. So I think it's great. I think it has the opportunity to sort of seek out those folks that have the ability to dive into something like this, and that's good for everybody.
But maybe what's important about his story, though, he wasn't a committer from day one.
Right.
Right. He wasn't on the Slack channel. He wasn't a committer or a developer.
I was not, but I did get a ton of help from mostly like back in the WebKit days, from people like Adam Barth and PDR and Eric Seidel. Like I got a lot of support from folks.
So we're at time.
Oh, okay.
If folks want to, if anyone wrote anything on Post-its, feel free to just hand them to me and I'll pull them all together. Thanks everyone for the conversations, and want more stickers, find one of us, or
Andy, I don't want to put you on the spot, but maybe do you want to send an email to Chromium Dev with just some of the links, like link to the deck and the link to, like I'm thinking about the link to the hot list that we want people to add to, and that way we have a, it might be good to just have a, and then that's a call to the Chromium community as well. Hey, feel free to add things to these hot lists.
I don't think I'm in Chrome. I was actually just thinking about that.
Well, anyway, we will work offline.
One of us will. I was like,
Yeah.
on Chromium.
All right.
But yeah, we can talk out a little bit more, and if folks have one. Thanks, Tyler.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.